Okay, guys, we are going to start talking about functions, okay? And this is a new module, but don't worry because we've actually been dealing with functions for the entire last module. And you guys have been working with functions for probably a lot longer than you realize. So there's a lot behind the idea of a function. The concept of a function is probably one of the most important concepts in all of mathematics. And you will be working with functions for the rest of your mathematics career. Okay, to see sort of how this isn't necessarily new ground for us, well, first I'm just going to give you kind of the basic idea of what a function is. And then to understand how, we've been working with functions, all along, we're going to have to introduce the idea of abstraction or generality. We're not going to go too deep into that. So what is this on the board behind me? Well, this is the most used picture for describing a function, okay? And what I've drawn on the board is basically a machine or a device. It's got these two funnels attached to it, okay? The top one is the input, and the one on the side is the output, okay? And when you say, well, what's in the box, okay? Well, what's in the box is, well, I guess it could be anything. We're going to put some input, some value into our machine. Something's going to happen, and then it's going to output a new value. This is sort of the most basic idea of what a function is. Okay, so now that we have the basic idea of our function, it's some machine that takes an input and gives you an output. Okay. Let's just look at some linear equation that we've seen 100 times before. Let's look at the linear equation y equals 2x plus 1. So we've been looking at this through the lens of linear equations. We have a linear equation in slope-intercept form. So if we wanted, we could plot this on a graph, right? And we would get a straight line. To sort of see how this is actually just a function, what we need to do is think back in Module 4, we talked very, very briefly about the idea of a dependent variable and an independent variable. Remember, linear equations are two variable equations, right? And we said that when we were going to graph them, one of those variables depended on what the other variable was, right? So in this linear equation here, we can see that y depends on what x is, okay? So if I were to give you an x value, let's just say x equals 0, all right, well then we can use this linear equation to find out what y is. Okay, so we would simply plug in our x value, and we would get that y is equal to 1. Okay, so x is our independent variable, meaning we can choose whatever we want for x, and then solve for y. Okay, so now I'm not gonna do anything different now, but what I'm going to do is I'm just gonna change the language, okay? Instead of calling x my independent variable, I'm gonna call x my input. I'm just gonna go ahead and erase this. So now, the variable x is the input, and what we get afterwards is the variable y, which is the output. Okay, so we're going to take x values and we're going to throw them into the input. we're going to get out y values. And what determines what y value we get is the function 2x plus 1. So that is our machine, right? So we're taking our x inputs, we're putting them into our machine, and we're getting a new value out. Okay? So let's go with that other example. I threw in the value 0, boop, plopped in the value 0. I ran it through my function, just plugging in 0 for x. We end up with the value 1. And we get 1 as our output. When we plug in 0, we get 1 as our output. Okay? And I could do that with any other number. Let's take -1 and throw it into our input. Okay? Well, we get 2 times -1 plus 1. We get so we plugged in -1, we put it through our function, and weirdly enough, it didn't actually change our value. We got the same value back. Okay, so I think that that's good for right now. In the next video, we are going to check out example 1.